Good morning, good afternoon, depending upon where you're joining us from today. This is Jeremy Martin, Vice President for Energy and Sustainability at the Institute of the Americas. And we're very pleased to welcome you to another one of our virtual sessions. We used to call these the webinar series, but I think everything's a webinar these days. So we'll just call this our virtual panel, but we're happy to be able to have this event and co-host this program indeed with our steering committee member, Sproule, and we look forward to the participation of Chris Milda, who is the Senior Vice President for Corporate Development at Sproule, and Jorge Milanese, who's the Regional Director for Latin America at Sproule. Jorge's based in Houston, Chris is based in Canada, and we're also happy that our colleague and non-resident fellow, Marta Jara, will be joining us on this conversation this morning. Marta is non-resident fellow at the Institute this year, and she was formerly Director General at ANCAP in Uruguay, and before that, a distinguished career at Shell. So I'm sure she's somebody that many of you joining us today have crossed paths with in your energy endeavors. We have titled this session today, well, the main title is Latin America's 2021 Energy Outlook, and it will be derived from some report findings and analysis that Sproule has released and published, and they'll share the link to that later. But the subtitle and where we want to focus is on these two words of resilience and reset. And we chose this title because we thought it would be important not just to look forward, but to take a minute to look back. And look back, but in as much as we can in a positive sense, and that's where we focus on the word resilience. We think that the last 12 months they've proved a lot of things and they've shown us a lot of things, but one thing we feel pretty good about when we talk about the energy sector in Latin America is resilience. So we'll talk a little bit about the resilience over the last 12 months or so, and why that's important as we get to this year and the remaining 9 or 10 months of this year, and the reset. And so, some folks describe the Build Back Better, and there's obviously been a lot of discussion about post-COVID recovery and green recovery. Summarized in the word reset. So we'll talk about what's going forward and how we see and how our panelists today see the reset for the energy sector in Latin America. So there's, as always, the opportunity to pose questions, and don't feel that you need to wait until the end of the session or the end of the formal remarks and presentation. You can always pose your questions in the Q&A button. I know everyone is probably used to the functionality of Zoom by now. At the bottom on your toolbar, there's a Q&A button. There's a chat button as well, but preferably if you post your questions in the Q&A, a little bit easier to sift through. And again, don't hesitate if there's something you want to pose right away. Don't wait to the last 3 minutes to pose your question. Make sure to get your question in early and ensure that it gets asked to the panelists. So like I said, we're going to go through a presentation and have some discussion of that presentation. We'll do a poll at the midway mark, and we'll do a poll at the end. So always trying to encourage and tease out the perspectives from the audience. So we'll look forward to your insights via the poll, or the polls, I should say. And so with that, I'd like to hand it over to Chris Milda, who is, as I said, the Senior Vice President for Corporate Development at Sproule. And I think Chris will frame some of the presentation, and then he'll hand it over to Jorge Milanese, and I'll come back and we'll do the discussion. So Chris, thanks again. We appreciate Sproule's participation and support as a steering committee member. And by the way, a shameless plug here, if anyone is interested in the steering committee at the Institute of the Americas, please let me know. Send me an email or a message. It's a great group, and the upside to the virtual space is we've been able to really have some interesting steering committee meetings more recently around the topic of hydrogen. So I'll stop there and hand it over to Chris. Thanks everyone for joining us.
All right, thank you, Jeremy, and it's great to participate today with the Institute of Americas and my colleague Jorge and also my fellow panelist Marta. Just to set the scene a little bit, coming off what was a very painful 2020 at so many levels, I think the question is not only how the region builds on the resilience that it has shown to deal with some of the market conditions emanating from the pandemic, but also, how can the region continue to attract capital, remain competitive in a global market, and also become a champion in its own right if we think about some of the challenges, but also the opportunities that come from the energy transition. And I'm going to let Jorge take us through some of the individual countries and the highlights in the region that we've seen in a bit. But before I do that, I wanted to just touch on some of the big picture observations that we've made. And so, one thing that we have seen is that even though regional M&A activity was down in the oil and gas sector in 2020, we have witnessed a significant pickup in activity towards the end of the year, not just in closed transactions, but also just activity and interest levels. And that momentum is starting to rebuild into this year, also, of course, helped and supported by a recovery in commodity prices. But I think there are also some differences between different markets. And I think the competitiveness remains strong if you look at Brazil and Colombia as some of the major markets. But Mexico and Argentina have lost some relative ground if we're talking about that. Guyana's story is continuing to develop, some very exciting progress made there. And there's also stronger interest in Suriname. Tagged to some of the success in the wider basin. But talking a bit about Brazil, because I think Brazil has demonstrated probably the best real momentum in recent times, both based on bid rounds, Petrobras' divestment process, and a liberalization of the gas market as well. It is one of the few countries, really a handful of countries globally, that has consistently grown oil production in recent years and has now again surpassed the 3 million barrel per day mark. Will continue to grow in the medium term with some of the major fields like Tupi and Búzios and others that will come on stream in coming years. And we're also seeing a changing dynamic in the gas market in Brazil over the coming years, which will have repercussions for other players as well, like Bolivia. And Jorge will talk a little bit more about that. Colombia is also on a very positive path with significant rig activity and some positive structural changes and investment in infrastructure projects, which has been building a bit of a positive momentum for one of the region's traditional darlings. The other thing I think is that the energy transition, as we see it, is well underway in Latin America, but access to capital and the ability to follow through on some projects has been challenged in many markets. Having said that, Latin America is poised to play a major role in the transition, both as a consumer of energy, but also potentially as an exporter of emerging commodities, such as hydrogen, that will play an important role in the decarbonization efforts. And some of the most ambitious plans we've seen to date have been in Chile, who also have the most comprehensive carbon tax scheme in the region. The other question, which we'll touch a little bit on, is really around whether NOCs in the region can deploy a lens that is consistent with some of the longer term policy goals centered around net zero, while continuing to deliver from the undoubted resources inherent in the region. And as we've seen in recent years as well, some of the stability and clarity in the policy sphere is going to be a key ingredient for the relative success of the various players in the region. So with some of those initial comments, I'm going to pass it over to Jorge, who will give us a bit of a regional tour and hit some of the highlights in the region. There are some further insights that are available in Sproule's regional outlook report, which some of these slides are built on as well. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jorge.
Okay, well, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Jeremy, Institute of Americas, for having us today. If you have been participating in these meetings of the Institute of the Americas, welcome back. If time you are in the right place. The Institute has always have a very keen eye on Latin America and has an excellent understanding of all the issues in the. With that said, let's go to to several slides, and I have this initial slide that is most of the time is somehow surprising, because when you look at upstream deals in Latin America, you don't think that the region is active at all. And you can see that there has been a fairly good pipeline of deals happening throughout the different cycles of the industry. 2020 hasn't been an exception. Of course, in general, globally, the number of deals and the importance of the deals have went down, but still you can see that Latin America has completed a fairly good number of deals, over 50, as you see here. And we are only following here deals over $10 million, and there has been multiple other deals below that threshold. But if you are not familiar with Latin America, you may be surprised at the number of deals that have been completed in a very challenging year. So I think that is a good summary of the resilience that we mentioned before, that the region has continued evolving and welcoming foreign investment. Many companies have joined the ranks of other colleague companies in the region, and this is a good summary of that. So if we go country by country around Latin America and the Caribbean in 10 minutes or less, let's start with Mexico. Mexico is a right combination of technical and economic factors. You'll know that since 2013, the government has opened up, the country has opened up the country to foreign investment. Has been over one contracts signed already with more than $40 billion in commitments. Out of those commitments, Mexico has led Latin America in terms of exploration. More than 30 wells have been drilled during 2020, and several of them positive. More exploration wells have been drilled in the Mexican side of the Gulf of Mexico than on the US side. And that tells a lot of all the activity that is ongoing. For 2021, more good big news are coming. As you see, ENI is planning to start the biggest FPSO ever in Mexico, 90,000 barrels of oil per day. Equinor, Shell, and many others have announced wells that they are planning to drill. So overall, good activity that will continue in 2021 and further on. In some cases, there are not very positive comments coming from Mexico, but I think that we all have to remember that Mexico may have paused on the energy reform, but hasn't gone back. I think that if you have to remember something from this slide, perhaps that is the comment that I want to remark. Going to Trinidad and Tobago, if you cannot see Trinidad and Tobago, it's because it's here. It's a small island, but nevertheless, it's a country with over 100 years of experience in oil and gas. They have multiple offshore developments. It was the first LNG liquefaction, natural gas liquefaction plant in South America that has 4 trains now. It's a big source of revenue for the joint venture and for the country as well. But 2020 was a year of onshore discoveries. Several announcements has been made, different exploration wells, pilots around EOR. The country has a CO2 EOR recovery pilot, which is very remarkable. Not many examples of that in Latin America. But out of all the other drilling in the offshore, Shell, BP, BHP, they all announced very important capital projects in the offshore. And actually, in 2021, we are looking forward to hear more about Shell first gas in 2 of the greenfield developments that they are doing there. And also BP continues drilling a very good series of important wells, and Matapal is one of them that they expect first gas by 2022. Continuing, Guyana, you probably heard a lot about Guyana, and more good news are coming. ExxonMobil, Hess, and CNOOC, the joint venture, has started the development of the first offshore oil production in the country. The government has already received 5 million barrels of oil entitlement, $250 million. So little by little, things are progressing. The consortium already announced the second development in the same block. And Tullow very recently, actually this week, I believe, they extended the exploration phase until 2023 out of the 2 very good wells that they already drilled there. And there might be announcements of a second licensing round in the offshore, maybe not 2021, but in 2022. If we go to Suriname, continuing with the trend, Apache made in 2023 significant oil discoveries. And you see here that we had Keskesi for 2021. And indeed, it was another discovery, the 4th one in the same block. The consortium of Petronas and ExxonMobil in Block 52 also drilled a 4th discovery in 2020. And in the case of Block 58, the development phase has been handed over to Total, who has started that. The national oil company, Staatsolie, is conducting a bid round for the shallow water. So there will be announcements coming soon during April, I believe. And there are multiple other opportunities onshore as well. In Venezuela, it may be a big role in the recovery scenario of the country. It has all the capabilities to ramp up oil production significantly, very quickly. On the regional gas integration, the country also can play a very important role, mostly offshore because they already have production in the Gulf of Paria. And there is significant discoveries done very close to Trinidad. It's a very easy connection with the existing liquefaction facilities at Trinidad. So hopefully that may develop in the future. Going south, Brazil, perhaps one slide is not enough to tell everything about Brazil. Jeremy and Chris, they already mentioned multiple good things about this. Multiple announcements of developments. Brazil is one of the countries that announced $120 billion in offshore investment in the next 5 years. And Petrobras conducting several onshore divestments that has created, a virtuous circle of welcoming other companies into the region and so everything on the positive side in Brazil. Equinor will be starting the 3rd phase of Bacalhau, the biggest FPSO ever in Brazil at 220,000 barrels per day will be starting production in 2021. There has been a very important IPO in Brazil during 2020, 3R, and PetroReconcavo may be doing the second one during 2021. The country will be conducting the 17th round of exploration in October this year, 92 blocks in several fields. And along with Colombia, this is another country that has an open bid round that was fairly successful during 2020, even during the pandemic. There was a lot of interest, and they will be conducting another bid round, open bid round in 2021 as well. Colombia, again, another country where many things have happened during 2020. Just a handful of them. The biggest transaction in terms of M&A happened in Colombia during 2020. Carlyle bought from Occidental all the onshore blocks that Occidental has been operating. But the good news is that Occidental is still in Colombia. So the country, the company hasn't left the country. It will be conducting offshore exploration in a new phase in Colombia. Another important thing that the country also conducted an unconventional bid round, and Ecopetrol has been awarded a block in a zone called Calais, and they will be doing an unconventional pilot during 2021. As I mentioned, the fourth cycle of the open bid round will happen also in 2021, and Colombia has already tagged 60 onshore and offshore blocks in order to do that. Going down to Ecuador, also several good things happened during 2020. Perhaps you don't remember this, but the Ecuador left the OPEC bloc in January 2020. That was a really good move in order to foster foreign investment in the country. I have here one for Jeremy. Petroamazonas has been developing Shpingo Tombococha Tiputini. So Jeremy, you have to say that if you want to talk about Ecuador, okay? So
ITT.
Yes, yeah, okay, ITT will do it. Good job. So the current government has announced plans to hand over the operation of the Esmeralda refinery. You probably remember that the country is going through presidential elections. So we will have to wait until the new president is sworn and see if these developments for 2021 can materialize during the current year. For Peru, I think that I want to highlight two things that were very positive for the country during 2020. One is Petrotal, a company that ramped up production in Block 95 in the middle of the jungle in the north of Peru from 0 to 13,000 barrels per day. A remarkable achievement in Peru, and during the pandemic, that was a very important development that really proves not only that the geology is there for the companies that want to develop opportunities in Peru, but also that you can do that in a very friendly way, taking into consideration the different stakeholders in Peru. And the other, although it was a duster, it was a very well. Karun drilled a very important offshore exploration well in Peru, which was Marina 1, that still proves that there is interest both onshore and offshore in Peru. Several companies have announced plans to resume exploration in Peru during 2021, and there might be bid rounds. Again, it's another country that will see a new government coming early this year. Bolivia is a country that has been producing natural gas almost forever. I think that it's a country that is at crossroads because their natural clients, both Brazil and Argentina, have been discovering a lot of natural gas domestically. And even Brazil has recently declared that eventually by 2030, they can produce more biogas than the gas that is importing from Brazil. So eventually, Bolivia will have to think harder a new strategy in order to continue developing the good resources that they have there and how to produce more exports in the coming years. Very important exploration wells have been drilled during 2020. And there are some exploration wells that will be drilled by YPFB, the national oil company, during 2021. Particularly, look for announcements in Diamante 7 and Yarara X2. Uruguay is a very interesting country. I want to mention here, but Uruguay, little by little, a completely renewable power generation. I think it's over 90% and probably close to 98%. Maybe Marta can confirm that for us. But I think it's a remarkable development for a country in Latin America that the power generation is almost completely green. It even has a surplus of electricity that has been exporting. And out of that, the country has announced a green hydrogen pilot that was known before as the Bernie project, but is one of the countries in Latin America where renewables has a big chunk of the policy, the energy policy, but also the offshore. The country been successful for the offshore one area to Bahamas Petroleum, and there is an open bid round. Basically, there is more open acreage available for companies. Argentina is a country that I would say that is in the road to recovery. The pandemic hit very, very hard the country and the oil and gas production, but there has been multiple announcements from YPF, the national oil company, and from private companies as well that resumed drilling, even exploration drilling in the south of the country and in the famous Vaca Muerta. I think that 2021 will be a critical year for the country, particularly in terms of gas production, and in terms of auctions or bid rounds. There has been announcements by a couple of provinces that they will resume activity during 2021. Last but not least, Chile, that is very famous because of the recent announcements on hydrogen exporting plants. But it's a country that, again, has been working for a long time in order to get there. I want to mention in particular, and Chris mentioned this as well, that Chile was the first country to implement a carbon tax back in 2014. So it's a country that has been working for a long time and a lot in order to diversify the power generation base. And as you see from the map, there is no point very near from the coast in Chile. So in terms of infrastructure, green hydrogen coming out of solar or wind has a very easy solution in terms of exporting. And I think I will stop here. Obviously, it's impossible to mention everything that have happened in Latin America in less than 10 minutes, but I look forward to your questions and the conversation with Marta, Jeremy, and Chris. Thank you.
No, thank you, Jorge. That actually, you were remarkably concise. You covered so much ground. Well, hopefully our friends in Trinidad and Tobago won't be too upset with you for not highlighting them on the map. But no, it's an important tour, and I think emphasizes exactly why we chose this title. It was a nice way to really reflect upon some of what did indeed transpire last year. It wasn't all doom and gloom. I mean, yes, there was some, and obviously early part of the year was very, very bad in many ways, but there were some transactions, there were some opportunities. And with that, the word opportunity is exactly our first opportunity for audience participation. And we want to publish the poll. And now that we've heard Jorge and Chris's input, and thoughts on the outlook and the reset in the region, how about you all? What do you in the audience think are the best opportunities for growth and investments? Let's say this year, right? I mean, let's say in the remainder of 2021, in the next 3 quarters, what do you see? Oil production, natural gas production, hydrogen, carbon capture, sequestration, solar, wind. So think about that. Go ahead and vote, and we will come back and share those. Unfortunately, the hosts and panelists can't vote, so we can't skew the results any certain way. I know Marta's trying to. No, I'm just. So take a second and vote, and we'll come back. But let me use this moment to indeed invite Marta Jara to comment. And so I think the idea was we wanted Marta to share sort of her perspectives, and we've received a bunch of questions already. So we'll get to those just as soon as possible. But Marta, comments, thoughts, insights, please.
Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you, Jorge, for the insights. Resilience and reset. I have to say I love this theme, and we could see from the materials presented that there are indeed very big players with large positions in oil and gas in the continent, and also with their own indigenous markets like Brazil that can guarantee the offtake of their products, and those that are advanced in the investment cycle. I believe they can reap the benefits in the short term. Yeah, but looking at the continent at large, there are many structural issues When I say structural issues, I mean both in terms of infrastructure and market reforms that seem to be overdue by a decade. For instance, in Argentina, assets like Vaca Muerta, they have an uncertain future, right? And places like Mexico, where progress had been made, and now we see some kind of U-turn in energy policy. So I think it has to be said that despite the activity we've seen in 2020, at this point in time, monetization of oil and gas resources or reserves in the region has become more uncertain. And so like in any transition, we will see who is the smartest in maximizing value in such a transition, right? So globally, big oil and gas has clearly been struggling to grow and maintain shareholder value. NOCs might not think about shareholder value as a notion, but nevertheless, value is at stake. So in my view, I think it's still very interesting to look at the M&A activity. And I'd like to see something like this describing what's happening in the electricity sector, no? Because this paints a picture. So transactions like China's state grid acquisitions in Chile, or what we're expecting in terms of integration of Petrotal with ISA in Colombia, and the global trends of cheap capital, but capital that explicitly does not want to be invested in oil and gas. I think these are trends to start watching carefully. And of course, I come from a country that lacks indigenous fossil fuels, so maybe we are in a better, more natural position to seize opportunities in the net zero emissions future. So this would be my thoughts in terms of what has been presented.
No, that's perfect. And I think there's several questions or great follow-up to some of those points, Marta. So we'll get to those. Let's go ahead and do the poll results now, and then we'll get everyone to comment. That'll be our first sort of discussion point. Okay, so interesting. Obviously, a lot to choose from for the audience, but nevertheless, natural gas production, almost 50% of the audience sees that as the biggest opportunity for growth and investment. So let's throw it over to if everyone's had this. So I can also. Well, there we go. Jorge, are you surprised? Chris, are you surprised? Go ahead, Jorge.
No, not really. I think that it really reflects the array of opportunities that there are in Latin America. And one important thing is that when you look at the energy history around the world, 100 years ago, it was coal. Everything was coming from coal. Then little by little, oil started trickling. And when you see today, there is an spaghetti of lines wiggling around, and it's great because we have many opportunities to get energy from. And the same is starting in Latin America. Latin America has been for many decades, consistently coal, oil, natural gas. And there are only a few countries that have really developed natural gas in a meaningful way, like Argentina, who has the natural gas for more than 50% of the energy matrix in the country. Colombia is another good example to mention. But more and more countries are using natural gas as a pivot point in the energy transition. And there are plenty of resources in Latin America. The challenge may be the integration.
It's a good point. I would throw in there hydro as sort of in some markets, Colombia and Brazil, where sometimes pray for rain was the energy policy, right? Chris, any thoughts on those poll results?
Yeah, I'm not surprised by the focus on natural gas, particularly just given the timeline. I think if you had a longer term view, 5 to 10 years out, it might look a little different.
Yeah.
But I think the gas market is a strong near-term opportunity for many countries in Latin America. And even though, I think as a transition fuel of choice, it's starting to lose its shine a little bit relative to what the expectation might have been, 5 or 10 years ago. But I think in my, in my mind, it has still a very, long runway. And I think also, there's a lot of focus on building infrastructure right now, which is critical to really furthering the, the opportunities around the natural gas industry. And as we've learned as well, it provides a natural complement to renewables and can be consistent also with a lower carbon world through carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And we've seen this with the LNG market as well in terms of how that's going. We've seen several cargoes in Asia, for example, procured on a carbon neutral basis over the past year. And so those supplier carbon credentials are going to be increasingly important in the future. And I think that has to be part of the thinking for the region as well, if it is to develop LNG export opportunities, for example. And I think based on, again, if you take a longer term view, the next 5 years, you'll start to see a very different regional gas market dynamic with, Brazil potentially at least by 2030 becoming in a surplus position. Argentina certainly has that potential. And I mean, again, from a competitive standpoint, based on the supply today, you probably have to be down to, kind of the $2 level to become a truly viable candidate for LNG, which is going to be challenging near term. But again, that comes down to scaling and infrastructure, which we talked about. So if some of those infrastructure deficits can also be addressed, I think that will be, give us also greater flexibility in terms of what those options are in the future and how it can interplay with some of the broader opportunities around the transition. And I think, again, just in terms of where the biggest changes are probably happening right now, it's in the Brazilian pre-salt. You're seeing, further gas pipelines being built. You're seeing CNG vessels. And so that's going to be a game changer once that's fully commissioned over the next 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, Brazil over the last 2 years has completely restructured their gas model. Yeah, Marta, I'm curious who would have voted.
I could vote, so I'm gonna keep it to my chest. But
okay.
No, I just wanted to say that indeed, Chris, natural gas has been called the transition fuel for many years now. And I think now we're starting to see a new twist to that meaning, which is that the midstream assets, they might also play a role in the incorporation of biogas, hydrogen as a diluter of the fossil methane. So these assets might have a longer life and a larger role to play in the transition to net zero.
Excellent. So there's a host of questions. Let's start with Mexico. I'll sort of try and put them together first geographically, and then ultimately with a couple of energy transition and M&A finance question. Let me bundle a little bit about Mexico. So there's been some preliminary announcements of a major discussion. Tomorrow is the all-important March 18th celebration of the expropriation of assets in Mexico. Apparently, we'll get further details from the Pemex Director General, maybe the President himself, about a major new discovery. So the first question is, Jorge, what do you know about that? Does that change things? Does that shift the sort of current narrative about Pemex in Mexico?
Well, yeah, we don't know much about this except the preliminary announcements that it will be something in the round of 1 billion barrels and something similar to Casqui that was another important discovery by Pemex a couple of years ago. So let's remember that Pemex has identified 20 priority opportunities that they're trying to develop, and I think that the company has been doing a remarkable job in trying to continue and pushing for not only an exploration, but also development both onshore and offshore. I believe that it's plainly evident that there is so much to be done in Mexico that the role of the private companies is definitely very, very important. So I think that there is enough space both for the national company and the private companies to continue adding value to Mexico and to the Mexicans by doing that. Let's remember that in terms of natural gas, for instance, a big chunk of natural gas is being imported from the US to Mexico. And there are multiple opportunities to produce more natural gas in Mexico, obviously. So it's something that is low-hanging fruit. It's just the will to create the right conditions in order to do that.
So we'll wait for further details and see how that gets played out. So Marta, you at one point in time were the Director General of Shell in Mexico. So I know it's been a few years, but let me unfairly, I won't ask you about the Pemex discovery, but rather a broader question about the sort of politicization, as somebody put in their question, about what's going on. There's a midterm election in Mexico that could indeed increase the control of the Congress by the current administration and the Morena Party. Give us some thoughts. I mean, if you were still in Mexico, one of these hypotheticals, if you were still in Mexico, what would be your way of managing, and how would you continue to try and develop this situation? And the final point I'd make is I'd invite everyone to read Marta's essay that she wrote a couple of weeks ago about using sort of almost behavioral psychology to understand energy policy making. So with that said, how do you apply that in Mexico?
Look, after 30 years in this game, I had to think out of the box to make sense out of it all. But, you know, I left Mexico in 2012. So just before the opening to private investments, that was a bit of a pity. And you know, it was long overdue. All the usual things we said, you go with an airplane and all of a sudden you stop seeing wells offshore. So, and really the geology doesn't know about limits. So that was a regret, a missed opportunity. And if I were to advise my executive committee at Shell to invest in Mexico or in any place where you see that there is no clear long-term policy, capital is shy. You know, all these investments need long-term repayment periods. And what I am starting to see is that when you start overlaying the different types of risks, right? The big ESG components, it starts to become harder and harder. So if I had to ask a question to our friends at Sproule, I find it interesting to count the number of deals and so on, but I'd like to know more what's the general view, for instance, for the horizon for valuation of these types of assets, right? So there are so many uncertainties that it becomes really hard to put a value on a project. So the short answer would be wait and see.
I like the way you took that question and then you posed one to the other panelists. That's fantastic. So, okay, Chris, over to you. What help us navigate or demystify how you would, if you were advising a client, in as much as you can say publicly, what would you speak to, or how would you assess the risk profile, and how would you advise a client in Mexico? We're still talking about
I think there's no question, right, that Mexico has taken a step back, or, you know, paused, as Jorge kind of put it, around the energy reform. And I think, you know, that is visible in the amount of capital that's deployed into Mexico right now. I think most of the bigger, you know, developments where we're starting to see some continued progress are around the deep water opportunities. But at the same time, I think, you know, if you look at it big picture, nobody would have thought that Mexico would have gone through the energy reform if you look 10 years back. And I think you still got to look at what's actually been developed there as a market with, you know, 70 plus different players. Some of that's been consolidated, and you know, some have been a little more gun shy, just given the recent political backdrop. But there's no question that the resource is there. And if you are prepared to be patient and play the long-term game in Mexico, there's money to be made. The resource is there. And, you know, I think Mexico in many ways really epitomizes, you know, the fear for the region as a whole, which is that of unfulfilled potential. And so I think, you know, if you were to advise a client today, you would have to, you know, look at it from a long-term perspective and know that, yes, short-term, there are some hurdles. But long-term, I think, you know, Mexico is going to be forced into making some decisions as well and figure out what works and what doesn't. And I think what the recent experience shows is that some of that momentum around energy reform and some of the discoveries we've seen in the last few years, has been stalled. And I think that is going to swing the pendulum back to a better point and a better policy environment going forward. Now, the timing of that, I don't want to be too prescriptive around, but I do think still that Mexico will come good ultimately.
There is the old axiom that energy is a long-term business, and there's the other one that says energy's long-term outlook and political calendars don't often line up. So there we go. Let's take a couple more geographic, and then I want to get into ESG, and I want to get into energy transition, and really talk about what some folks have posed questions in terms of, are we contradictory in how we look at some of these things in Latin America? But first, fracking in Colombia. So Jorge, you were part of a session we did last fall. We talked about risk profile in Colombia, M&A activity. You noted the huge Carlyle deal. We had Tony Hayward with us on that session last fall. What about, there have been some developments in fracking, there have been the pilots, but what's going on? There's been a couple questions received for an update on fracking and what that means in Colombia.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting development because there is no doubt that Colombia has a lot more resources than what they are producing today. Largely, Latin America as a whole has been a conventional play, with the sole exception of Vaca Muerta. But La Luna formation in Colombia is massive, and it has been tested several times in the past. So it's a matter of deciding to start developing that. And Colombia is a country that has been very progressive in the sense of planning ahead with enough time. The country as a whole has a very good perspective of how many resources they are going to need in the future, both in terms of oil and in terms of gas. And there is no doubt unconventional can supply the difference. So as I mentioned, Ecopetrol will start the first pilot. Fracking has been always a very political and very sensitive matter in Latin America. I should say perhaps coming out of the lack of real information or good information or good understanding. Yes, there has been some issues with fracking in the US and in Canada, but that happened many, many years ago. The companies that normally participate in fracking are international companies that have standards that most of the time are even better than the national standards where they operate. So Ecopetrol has called the torch and is going to do the first pilot that has been very contentious. There has been presentations to judges, to courts, a lot of discussions. I think that Ecopetrol is in a very good position to do a fantastic job there. Let's remember that the company teamed up with Occidental, and they are having a good experience coming out of the drilling and fracking in Permian. So obviously it was part of the plan in Ecopetrol in order to have that exposure, to have a very good job, do a very good job in Colombia. And there will be a second bid round for unconventional opportunities, and companies like ExxonMobil, Drummond, who has already have some experience there in Colombia, and Petrotal, that you can remember Fortín de Piedra in Vaca Muerta in Argentina. So world-class companies that can do a fantastic job in Colombia. And then, like many other things in the world, it's a decision of Colombians of what they want to do with the wealth that they have below their feet.
It's such an important, I mean, the political and the community element, if you want to call it ESG, but the fracking debate in Colombia has been a very lively debate for 5 or 6 years now. And so I think it speaks to the need for Ecopetrol and the other partners and the pilots to really make sure that this is, and I know they will do it, but fully transparent. But then also the Duque government has to be fully supportive and make sure that they're behind it, because I think that's been one of there have been some concerns, right? So let's move now. Speaking of sort of the ESG and environmental and community issues, let's talk a little bit about net zero, and let's talk a little bit about obviously we're moving towards the Glasgow Conference of the Parties later this year. The United States has re-entered the Paris Agreement. The new administration in Washington has been very strong, signaling the need for climate action. They're convening a climate summit on April 22nd, which is Earth Day. First question, I'm curious, and Chris, I think you noted this, and I want to throw this to Marta as a former head of an NOC. What is the role? I mean, Latin America, the NOCs are so important in the energy space, energy production, energy development, energy policy in many markets. What are NOCs in Latin America doing on net zero? Marta, just if you could answer that.
Well, I think NOC clearly, they play a role, a social role. They stabilize prices, you name it. But the counter side of that is that it's not, they're not dynamic organizations. So when you are vested heavily in a certain technology, in certain assets, like big NOCs that also rely on these revenues to fund national budgets, it's very difficult to, to take the lead on trying to stay ahead in the transition. And it's not surprising, and I use the space here to confirm what Jorge said. Uruguay reached 98% renewables, and this year, a very dry year, I think it was 93% renewable generation. It's not surprising that countries like Uruguay or Chile are taking it more seriously. It's not just because it's the right thing to do. It's also because for us, it becomes an opportunity to be self-sufficient, to try to jump on a new industry that's starting. It's much harder for NOCs that are vested in the old world, if you like.
Which is thank you. No, that's the perfect segue for this next question, and I'll stick with you, Marta, and then we'll have Jorge and Chris as well. And I'll read this because I think this is important, and it really does summarize so much of what we're thinking about and talking about every single day. And it says, in the race to embrace energy transition faster, do you see in Latin America a sort of mutually exclusive relationship between the development of conventional, i.e. fossil, and non-conventional, i.e. renewable clean energy resources? So I think this is what I alluded to earlier in this contradictory, is it a contradict? Are we talking friends and foes? Or are these not necessarily mutually exclusive? So I think it's following on your last point there, Marta, if you want to expand a little bit more.
Well, I think in a perfect world, I think you would use the cash generated by your traditional business to fund these new developments. But the nuance here is, when do you really start seriously and proactively addressing the transition, rather than it becoming an opportunistic pathway, okay? So, and as you said, Jeremy, political cycles have their own clocks, and this, it's a reality. It's not so easy to plan ahead very neatly. Things sort of happen on an opportunistic basis as well, right?
Yeah, Jorge, and then Chris.
Yeah, going to your question, if unconventional and unconventional are friends or foes, I think that there are toolboxes that we have, tools that we have in our toolbox, and we have to play them in the best way possible. Look at Argentina. Conventional gas production was declining in the country when they found Vaca Muerta. It's a fantastic resource. Same may happen in Colombia and other places. I think that it's good to have options, right? And doing it the right way creates a lot of flexibility and opportunities. No doubt that you have to, during the energy transition, you have to have fossil fuels supplementing what the renewables can offer. And natural gas has been identified like the main source for that. So I think that Latin America has an opportunity to tap into the different solutions that they have at hand.
Great. Chris, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that the point that Marta made, about how the the countries like Uruguay and Chile that don't have as significant, vested interest in the fossil fuel industry, kind of institutionalized through an NOC, are making, bolder kind of plans around the energy transition in many ways. But I think when we talk about energy transition, I think this is a key point, is we're really starting to see an energy system developing where all the various parts of the value chain are becoming much more integrated. And so, if you look at hydrogen production, for example, it can be supported by renewables or natural gas through green or blue, and blue requiring CCUS, of course. And then hydrogen competes with crude oil in the transportation vertical. And a lot of the challenges around that are going to be solved by oil and gas companies, because that's where that expertise really resides. When you're talking about CCUS, for example, and I think as organizations, even though they're not traditionally as dynamic as the IOCs might be, I think they're in many cases going to be more dynamic than a lot of the power companies, who I don't think are going to necessarily take the lead in terms of the energy transition, because utilities, whether they are private or public, don't tend to have the same kind of dynamism within their organizations. I think, though, that the challenge for NOCs in the region, and this is what Marta really touched on as well, is that how do you transition with that market and kind of embrace the broader energy value chain, both through connecting the dots in the whole markets and also shape the development of those markets, while you continue to attract and develop that talent and expertise to compete effectively, while at the same time trying to deliver on the economics to contribute to the government's treasury. And I think that cycle is probably going to be tough to break. So that asymmetry that exists there relative to market drivers is going to be the biggest challenge, I think. Although you see NOCs strategically positioning to become national energy companies. And I think the proof's going to be in the pudding. But the most successful NOCs, and this is, I think, an important point, are really those that have been unshackled from active political influence. So you look at a company like Equinor, for example, in Norway, who become a global powerhouse in their own right, but they have a very aggressive strategy for the energy transition. I think the important lesson there is both in terms of how you develop energy markets, but also in terms of how you create a national champion, not in the traditional sense, but one that can really be a self-sufficient driver for growth that can look beyond the next election cycle. So if we can break that, I think there will be some good stories coming out of it.
No, I think, the role of oil and gas companies, not just national oil and gas companies, is fundamental. I mean, we've heard so much, you point to Equinor, but there's so many others that are now positioning themselves as energy companies, right? And I would suggest, the expertise and forte of so many of these large IOCs are the deployment of enormous capital for enormously complex projects to deliver, cost efficient, timely, all of the things that will be required in the energy transition in a net zero world. So I guess that's a plea for them to make sure that they place the right bet as well. Let's run the last poll and then we'll wrap up. Man, this time is flying by. Thank you all so much. I apologize not to those who we couldn't get to your questions, but thanks so much. What a wonderful participation today. All right, so here we are. We can't leave without this very, very difficult question. We've been dancing around it, but let's put it on the table. How prepared are countries in Latin America for a less carbon intensive energy mix? Policies and plans are in place, getting ready, not well prepared. So we'll give folks a second to vote here, and then we'll wrap up with our final thoughts from the panel. All right, everyone had a chance to vote. I know we just hit 10 o'clock here in California, so we'll wrap this up. So great, we'll publish those results in a second. Oh, come on, people. Where's the optimism? 61% of our audience says that Latin America is not well prepared for a less carbon intensive energy mix. Okay, we'll go in reverse order. Marta, do you agree?
I think it's a little bit too pessimistic. I would say getting ready in general.
Excellent.
But I'm an optimist at heart. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry about that, Jorge.
I'm in the same camp. I'm optimist. So I think that Latin America is coming along. They're getting ready. There are several good announcements and decisions on part of governments and companies in order to go there.
So if Latin America is a sprinter, they're limbering up, maybe not in the blocks, but close. Chris?
Yeah, no, in my mind, there's no doubt, they're getting ready. I think there are some, political and institutional obstacles in some markets more than others, but I also think we need to recognize that there is very significant expertise and capacity building that's been taking place over, several years. And I'm with my fellow panelists. I'm an optimist for the future.
Optimism is very, very well received and appreciated, especially if, again, we go back to our title here, our subtitle, Resilience and a Reset. You got to be optimistic if you're going to reset, I would say. And speaking of optimism, please don't decline the opportunity to join us for more conversation. I don't know if that's speaking of optimism, but we hope to continue these kinds of conversations at the La Jolla Conference. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the Institute of the Americas La Jolla Conference. We're going to celebrate all month long in May. We're going to be hosting sessions on Friday mornings, some breakouts throughout the month, some content that'll be released. Check out the website. We'll make sure we get that information out as well when we share the recording and the slides that were delivered today. Marta Jara, Jorge Milanese, Chris Milda, thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure. And have a great day, everyone. We appreciate your participation.
Thank you all.
Thank you. An honor to be here.